Center, Alaska. Copy to declared emergency.
January 5th, 2024. Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, 16,000 feet above Oregon, when a door plug suddenly blows out, ripping a hole in the side of the plane. "171 passengers breathing through oxygen masks, staring into the void." But here's what they didn't tell you. 2 months before this nightmare, a Boeing whistleblower named John Barnett was screaming about exactly these safety failures to anyone who'd listen. 32 years in quality control. He knew where Boeing buried the bodies. March 9th, 2024, they find Barnett's body in a hotel parking lot. Self-inflicted gunshot, they said. Right in the middle of testifying against Boeing.
I know that he did not commit suicide. There's no way.
But wait, it gets worse. 2 months later, Joshua Dean, another Boeing whistleblower, 45 years old, perfectly healthy, suddenly contracts a flesh-eating MRSA infection. Dead within days. 2 whistleblowers, 2 months, both dead. Boeing calls it a coincidence. Was this corporate negligence or something much darker? Before we talk about dead whistleblowers, let's talk about dead passengers, because Boeing's problems didn't start with a door blowing off over Oregon. They started with 2 planes falling out of the sky like stones. Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019. Same plane model, same deadly flaw. 346 people gone in less than 5 months. The culprit had a deceptively boring name, MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Sounds like something that helps pilots land smoothly. In reality, MCAS was Boeing's software band-aid for a fundamental design problem. The 737 MAX's engines were too big for its airframe, making the plane prone to nosediving. So Boeing programmed a computer to automatically push the nose down when it thought the plane was climbing too steeply. One tiny sensor, one false reading. And MCAS would repeatedly slam the nose toward the ground while pilots fought desperately to regain control. The Indonesian pilots of Lion Air 610 battled their own plane for 11 minutes before it hit the water at 450 miles per hour. The Ethiopian pilots lasted 6 minutes. Turns out, Boeing knew. Internal documents later revealed engineers had discussed the risks. They knew pilots weren't trained on MCAS because admitting it existed would require expensive simulator training, which would delay sales and cost airlines millions. Boeing assumed pilots would immediately recognize the problem and override the system with manual flight controls, and that doing so would not require exceptional piloting skill or strength. A $100 sensor and some extra pilot training could have prevented both crashes. Boeing paid the Department of Justice $2.5 billion to settle criminal fraud charges, but there was no admission of guilt, no executives in handcuffs. Just a corporate fine that amounted to pocket change for a company worth $140 billion. Within a year, Boeing's share price had fully recovered. Apparently, mass death is just another cost of doing business. Coming back to the first whistleblower, John Mitchell Barnett worked in quality control at Boeing for 32 years, rising through the ranks to become a quality manager at Boeing's Charleston, South Carolina plant. This was a company man, someone who bled Boeing blue, until he discovered something that made his blood run cold. John Barnett says tests suggest up to a quarter of the oxygen systems could be faulty and might not work when needed. He also claimed faulty parts were deliberately fitted to planes on the production line at one Boeing factory. Barnett followed protocol like the good company man he was. He filed internal reports, documented everything, sent his findings up the chain of command. And nothing happened. The defective systems stayed defective. The dangerous planes kept rolling off the production line. So Barnett did what any reasonable person would do. He took it to the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA, however, said it could not substantiate that claim because Boeing had indicated it was working on the issue at the time. The same agency supposed to keep flying safe apparently had better things to do than investigate reports of oxygen systems that could kill passengers en masse. So Barnett went public. He spoke to journalists, testified before Congress, made headlines when he went public, saying he wouldn't trust planes made in South Carolina to be airworthy. Boeing transferred him to a different department, isolated him from colleagues, made his work life hell. His family says Barnett suffered PTSD and anxiety from his work at Boeing, but he kept fighting. Even after retiring in 2017, Barnett continued his legal battle against Boeing, suing for retaliation and demanding accountability. Then on March 9, 2024, John Barnett was found dead in his truck in a hotel parking lot in Charleston. He died March 9th of what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound, the Charleston County Coroner's Office said. The man who'd spent 7 years fighting Boeing was suddenly gone. Interestingly, Barnett was in Charleston for depositions in his ongoing case against Boeing. He'd just given testimony about the company's safety failures. His lawyers say he was in good spirits, looking forward to the next phase of his legal battle. His lawyers and family blamed Boeing for the death. If John Barnett's death was suspicious, Joshua Dean's was downright eerie. Dean wasn't even a Boeing employee. He worked as a safety auditor at Spirit Aerosystems, the company that manufactures fuselages for Boeing's 737 MAX. You know, the same planes that had been falling apart mid-flight. Dean's job was literally to catch defects before they killed people. And boy, did he find defects. Dean discovered structural problems in the fuselages, cracks, faulty installations, manufacturing shortcuts that could cause catastrophic failures. And he wasn't subtle about it. Dean filed formal complaints with the FAA, documented safety violations, and raised hell internally at Spirit Aerosystems. The company's response? They fired him.
Dean had flagged safety concerns in Boeing planes. He'd also talked about alleged misconduct.
Dean sued for retaliation, claiming Spirit was silencing him for doing his job too well. He alleged that the company was shipping defective fuselages to Boeing, knowing they could fail in flight. His lawsuit was working its way through the courts when something strange happened. On April 21st, 2024, Dean, whom his family described as a health nut and someone who didn't have a regular doctor because he was never sick, checked himself into an urgent care because he was having trouble breathing. By April 30th, he was dead. This was a 45-year-old man who prided himself on his fitness. His family called him obsessive about his health. He didn't even have a regular doctor because he never got sick. It's also incredibly rare for a healthy person to contract such a severe case out of nowhere. Dean went from perfectly healthy to dead in 2 weeks. Dean and Barnett, both former employees who raised significant safety concerns about Boeing aircraft, passed away unexpectedly this year. 2 whistleblowers, 2 unexpected deaths, 2 months apart. At what point does coincidence become conspiracy? When 3 people die? 5? 10? How many truth tellers have to end up in body bags before we start asking uncomfortable questions about who benefits from their silence? To understand why Boeing whistleblowers keep dying, you need to understand the culture that created them in the first place. This isn't a company that welcomes dissent. It's a corporation that treats safety concerns like threats to national security. Boeing has been the subject of 32 whistleblower complaints with the workplace safety regulator in the United States during the past 3 years. In Boeing's twisted corporate culture, the people trying to prevent crashes were the real enemy, not the actual defects killing passengers. Employees feared retaliation, being denied bonuses, or even being fired for raising concerns, creating a toxic culture where safety issues remained unreported. Boeing's legal strategy is equally revealing. After the 737 MAX crashes, the company negotiated a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice. Translation: they paid a fine and promised to be good boys, and in exchange, criminal charges would be dropped. No executive faced jail time. No one was held personally accountable for 346 deaths. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Boeing makes money. Regulators stay employed. Politicians get campaign contributions. And the only people who pay the real price are passengers and the whistleblowers trying to protect them. You'd think after 346 deaths and billions in fines, Boeing would have learned its lesson. You'd be wrong. The Alaska Airlines door plug blowout proved that Boeing's problems were ongoing systemic failures that continued to put passengers at risk. The mid-exit door plug separated from the Boeing 737 MAX 9 passenger plane on January 5, 2024, minutes after Flight 1282 took off from Portland International Airport. Just to be clear, this was a brand new aircraft delivered just 3 months earlier. How does a brand new airplane leave the factory missing critical safety bolts? The NTSB has found that systemic failures, including missing bolts securing the door plug, led to the door plug blowout on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 in January 2024. The FAA's response was predictably toothless. They grounded similar planes temporarily, conducted some inspections, and then quietly put them back into service. Over 170 MAX 9s were grounded for a few weeks while investigators played theater, but the underlying problems remained unchanged. The same toxic culture that prioritized speed over safety, the same economic incentives that rewarded corner cutting, the same regulatory capture that let Boeing police itself. The Alaska Airlines incident wasn't an anomaly. It was a preview, a glimpse into what happens when a company treats safety as a public relations problem instead of an engineering requirement. And let's talk numbers, because Boeing certainly does. Every safety decision at Boeing is ultimately an economic calculation dressed up in corporate speak about risk management and operational efficiency. The real math is simpler and more brutal. How much does it cost to fix the problem versus how much does it cost to let people die? Just consider the door plug incident. Those 4 missing bolts probably cost about 50 cents each. $2 in hardware could have prevented a near catastrophe that terrorized 171 passengers and cost Boeing hundreds of millions in lawsuits, investigations, and lost sales. But replacing those bolts would have required stopping the production line, investigating how they went missing, and implementing new quality controls. That process could delay aircraft deliveries by weeks or months. Boeing delivers about 400 commercial aircraft per year, each worth roughly $100 million. Every day of production delay costs the company approximately $1.1 million in delayed revenue. A 2-week delay to fix the bolt problem would cost $15 million. So from Boeing's twisted perspective, it's cheaper to deliver defective planes and settle the occasional wrongful death lawsuit than to actually fix their manufacturing process. The 737 MAX crashes cost Boeing about $20 billion in total: fines, settlements, lost sales, and grounded aircraft. Sounds like a lot, right? But Boeing's market capitalization is over $140 billion. The MAX disaster cost them roughly 14% of their company value. Compare that to the cost of actually fixing the MCAS system before it killed anyone. Boeing could have redesigned the software, retrained every 737 MAX pilot in the world, and implemented proper safety protocols for less than $2 billion. But guess what, guys? That $2 billion would have come out of Boeing's quarterly profits, hurting stock prices and executive bonuses immediately. The $20 billion disaster was spread over several years and treated as an exceptional loss. In terms of silencing whistleblowers, legal retaliation cost Boeing maybe $50,000 per case. Firing someone, defending against their lawsuit, settling out of court. Compare that to the cost of actually addressing their safety concerns, which could run into the hundreds of millions if it required major design changes or production delays. The economic incentives are perfectly clear. It's cheaper to destroy the messenger than to fix the message. Boeing has essentially calculated that killing whistleblowers, either through legal harassment or more direct means, is more cost-effective than addressing the systemic problems they're exposing. Strip away the corporate doublespeak and regulatory theater, and the story becomes heartbreakingly simple. 2 men saw something wrong. 2 men tried to make it right. 2 men are now dead. John Barnett spent 32 years loving Boeing. He believed in aviation, believed in safety, believed that doing the right thing mattered. When he discovered that 1 in 4 oxygen masks wouldn't deploy in an emergency, he didn't shrug and collect his paycheck. He filed reports. When nothing happened, he escalated. When his bosses ignored him, he went to regulators. When regulators failed, he went public. If Boeing had listened to him 7 years ago, those 171 passengers might never have found themselves staring into the void at 37,000 feet. Joshua Dean was younger, hungrier, more idealistic. He thought safety audits actually mattered, that documenting defects would lead to fixes. He found structural problems in the same fuselages that later blew apart mid-flight. He raised alarms. He filed complaints. He sued when they tried to silence him. Dean died believing that the truth would eventually win. That somewhere in the system was someone who cared more about lives than liability. Both men were wrong about one thing. They believed the system would protect them for doing the right thing. They thought that speaking truth to power was noble, not fatal. They couldn't save themselves, but maybe they can still save the passengers whose lives hang in the balance every time someone boards a Boeing aircraft. The question is, will anyone listen this time? Or will it take more bodies, both passengers and whistleblowers, before the system finally changes? This story isn't really about Boeing. It's about what happens when corporations become more powerful than the governments that are supposed to regulate them. When profit margins matter more than human lives. When telling the truth becomes more dangerous than staying silent. John Barnett and Joshua Dean died, revealing a system so corrupt, so captured, so morally bankrupt, that it treats safety advocates as existential threats. This isn't just Boeing's failure, it's America's failure. We've created a system where accountability is optional for corporations, but deadly for individuals. Where justice is negotiable, but silence is mandatory. Where the cost of doing the right thing can literally be your life. If telling the truth about Boeing gets you killed, what does that say about the truth they're trying to hide? If speaking up about safety failures makes you a target, what other failures are being covered up by fear? The 171 passengers who stared into the void through that missing door plug deserve a company that prioritizes their lives over its stock price. The real question isn't whether Boeing is safe to fly. The real question is whether America is safe for anyone who dares to speak truth to power. Because if corporate whistleblowers keep dying under suspicious circumstances, the message to everyone else is crystal clear. Shut up, sit down, and let the planes fall where they may. Would you still fly Boeing? More importantly, would you still speak up if you worked there? The lives of future passengers may depend on how we answer both questions.